Today we're going to be talking about congruent triangles. Now, we've already touched base on this a little bit, and we've worked a little bit with congruent statements, but we're going to look further into them today and use them a little bit more heavily. So, what makes two triangles congruent? Well, two triangles are going to be congruent if and only if, so shortened by IFF, their corresponding parts are congruent. Now, again, we've talked about this a little bit before with congruent triangle statements, saying that, the first letter in each statement means that those two angles are congruent. Okay, so again, two triangles are congruent if all of their corresponding parts are congruent. And we can kind of shorten that to CPCTC, which stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So that's where we're getting that abbreviation, CPCTC. So let's talk about writing statements for congruent figures. Again, you always want to write corresponding vertices in the same order. So if we pick angle I to be first, we want to look at which other angle in the other triangle corresponds to angle I, which one's congruent with it. So again, writing a triangle congruent statement, you're first going to start with the triangle symbol. And I'm going to look at this first triangle and just put the vertices in any order that I want. So I'm going to say angle IGE. Okay, and I'm just going in the order because I see that I has one arc mark, G has two, and E has three. I'm then going to use the congruent statement, and we're going to write the other triangle in the same order. So which angle in the other triangle also has one arc mark? That's O. So O is going to come first. Then we put G, which has two arc marks. That lines up with angle M. And then the last one would be Q. So again, we're lining up all those corresponding pieces looking at the angles. If we want to write angle and side congruent statements, we're doing the same thing, but we're going to be writing 3 angle statements and 3 side statements. So if I say angle I is congruent to which other angle, again, we said that I and O both have one arc mark, so we're going to say angle I is congruent to angle O. Angle G, which has 2 arc marks, would be congruent to angle M, because that also has 2. And then angle E is congruent to angle Q because they both have 3 arc marks. So those would be your angle congruence statements. And then for sides, you're going to talk about side lengths. So we see this side here, IG, has 1 tick mark. So we're going to say IG is congruent to OM, right? I corresponds to O and G corresponds to M. So we're going to say IG is congruent to OM. The other side we can see is GE has 2. So we're going to say GE is congruent to, now again, G corresponds to M, E corresponds to Q. So we're going to say MQ. And then the last one with the 3 tick marks is side IE. So we're going to say IE is congruent to, now I corresponds to O, and E corresponds to Q. Okay, so we can have a triangle congruent statement where we name the 2 triangles, the angles where we name all the pairs of congruent angles, and then the sides where we name all the pairs of congruent side lengths. So let's look at some examples. If we look at number 1, write a congruent statement for the following figure. So we want to know which 2 triangles are congruent. So I'm going to pick one triangle to start with, and I'm going to pick this one here. And I'm going to look at the angles. So E has an arc mark, D has the 90 degrees, and then G is unmarked. So I'm just going to write it in that order, E, D, G. So now when we're looking at the second triangle, which is down here, we have to look for those same type of markings. So we said E has 1 arc mark, and down here G does, so G is going to come first. D had the 90 degrees, and so does F. And then G in our blue triangle was unmarked. The unmarked triangle, or the unmarked angle in the red triangle is E. So we have triangle EDG is congruent to triangle GFE. So again, you just have to pay attention to the order. If we look at number 3, we essentially want to do the same thing. Which two triangles are congruent to one another? So let's mark those out. We have this triangle here, the blue triangle. And again, I see some angle markings. So we have W with 1, V with 2, and then Y with none. So I'm going to go W, V, Y in that order. And if we look at the second triangle with similar markings, the angle with 1 was Z, the angle with 2 is T, and the unmarked one is angle X. So again, we just have to go in the same order that we did with the first triangle. Now, not only can you write some congruence statements, but you can also find actual values, angle measurements, and side lengths. So if we look at this next diagram, it says TJM is congruent to PHS. Complete these statements. So we want to know which angle is congruent to angle P. So which angle is congruent to angle P? Well, P is written first, and so is T. So we can say that P and T are equal or congruent. So in this case, if T is 73, we can come up here and say that angle P is also 73. So we can fill out number 7 as 73 degrees. Now the reason why we're actually looking for a degree here is because we have the little m for measure and we have an equal sign. We're not writing a congruence statement. If we look at number 5 is saying side JM is congruent to which other side. Now, JM are this last two letters written in the congruent statement, and so is HS. So we're going to say that JM and HS are the same. Number 6 is asking what is the measure of angle M. So again, if we look at our congruence statement, angle M is last, and so is S. So that means M and S are the same. If S is 48, that means M is going to be 48 degrees. Now, number 8 is asking us what's the measurement of MT. So again, if we look at our congruence statements, let's pick a different color. All right. We're looking at MT. We can see that TM, that's the first and the last letter in our congruence statement. So down here, we're looking at P and S. So we know that MT here, I'll put a tick mark, is going to be congruent to PS, which is that side there. So if PS is 5 centimeters, that means MT is 5 centimeters. And now the last one, number 9, is simply just asking us to write a triangle congruence statement, but in a slightly different order. So if H comes first, which angle is congruent to H? Looking at our original congruence statement, it's in the middle, so J comes first. P is the first one in our original congruence statement, so the first one in the original is T, so it's going to be JT, and then our last angle M. So again, all of our corresponding parts are lining up. We're just looking to put them in a slightly different order. Now, something else that we're going to want to know about is the third angle theorem. And this is just going to help us find missing angles in congruent triangles. So what this says, if two angles in one triangle are congruent to two angles in another triangle, what can we say about the third? So if we have two triangles, and this angle is congruent to this one, this angle is congruent to this one, they're saying, hey, what can we say about those third angles in both of those? Okay, so if we have two triangles, and I'm just going to draw them upside down. All right, and we say that this angle here is 100, this angle here is 100, this angle here is 20, and this angle here is 20. So we have two angles in one triangle that are congruent to 2 angles in another triangle. Again, what can we say about the third triangle in each of these? Well, I could use triangle sum theorem to solve. So if I do that, I'm going to do 180 minus 100 minus 20, which gives me 60. So that means this third angle is 60 degrees. Well, if I use triangle sum in the second triangle, I'm going to still be subtracting 120, so I'm still going to be left with 60. So what can we say about the third angles? We can say that they are also congruent to each other. All right, so if 2 angles in one triangle are congruent to 2 angles in another, we can say that those third angles are also going to be the same. So let's look at number 10. It says to solve for the variable. So we're looking for x down here. Let's fill in all the information we know in both triangles. Okay, I see that B has 1 angle marking and so does D, so that means B is also going to be 60 degrees. C has 2 markings and so does E, so that means that this is going to be 70 degrees. Well, now I can easily use triangle sum to figure out what that third angle, that 2x, is supposed to be. So if I do 180 minus 70 minus 60, that's going to leave me with 50. So that means this angle here, 2x, is 50, and this angle here, A, is 50. So if I want to solve for x, I can simply say, hey, that 2x is supposed to be 50. So I'm going to make it equal to 50 and solve. Divide by 2, we get x is 25. Again, I used corresponding parts and triangle sum to find all the missing angle measurements. Let's look at number 12. Now, number 12 is using a congruence statement. Okay, so for number 10, we looked at all the angle markings. For number 12, we're looking at the congruence statement. So they're telling me that H and T are the same. So if H is 51, that means T is 51 degrees. They're also telling me that J and R are the same. So if R is 83, J is 83 degrees. And then they're telling me that angle K and angle S are the same. Now, neither of them have an actual angle measurement, but we can easily figure out what that is supposed to be. Okay, so if I look at this first triangle, you can use triangle angle sum theorem. 180 minus 51 minus 83 gives me 46. So I can say that angle K should be 46 degrees along with angle S. Now, we haven't solved for the variables yet. Our variables are A and B, but identifying all the angle measurements is going to help me to do that. So if I look at A, that's 6A minus 3, which is angle T, which is supposed to be 51 degrees. So I'm simply going to set them equal to each other. 6A minus 3 equals 51 and solve. Add 3 to both sides. I get 6A is equal to 54, which means A is equal to 9. All right, I can do the same thing when solving for B. We have 7B minus 10, which is angle K, which we found out is supposed to be 46. So 7B minus 10 is equal to 46 and solve. Add 10 to both sides. I get 7B is equal to 56. Divide both sides by 7, and I get B is equal to 8. All right, we'll do one more and we'll look at number 14. Now, with number 14, they are telling us that 2 triangles are equal to each other. There is no picture, so it may be helpful to go ahead and just draw one to start. So they're talking about 2 congruent triangles. We have A, B, C, and then I have to mark the next one in the same order, D, E, F. All right, now it tells us that AB is 15, BC is 20, AC is 25, and FE is 3x minus 7. Find x. Well, looking at our congruence statement and our picture, we can see that BC is congruent to FE, right? BC is the second 2, EF is the second 2, and they're drawn in the same orientation in our triangles. So to find x, I simply have to set 3x minus 7 equal to 20 and solve. So add 7 to both sides. 3x is equal to 27, and divide by 3, we get x is equal to 9. So if you don't have a picture, don't hesitate to draw one to help you out.